G'day and welcome to another video with Better Pics. Hope this finds everyone well. Just wanted to do a very quick beginning to end editing video today, just on this particular image which I photographed in central part of Italy last year, obviously during winter. So this image is a beautiful area that's very close to the mountains. Very cold morning, as you can imagine, and it provided a few challenges from the editing process, but it certainly gave me a lot of enjoyment as well through the editing process, and it's something that I was quite happy with the result. So a little bit of backstory. It's a very small town called Guardiagrele, which is in the region of Abruzzo. And I was staying there for about a week and a half. I was staying there for about 3 weeks, and at the time, and decided to head out one morning after some fresh snow, just a very light dusting, and saw this image in my mind and decided to capture it. So I'll just very quickly show you the process that I went through to edit this image. As I said, there was a few challenges that I found just on really keeping focus and attention within the image, but it worked out pretty well, and I'm pretty happy with the result. So you can see here I'm in Adobe Camera Raw. I've got absolutely nothing adjusted with the image, so this is the raw, fresh out of camera. You can see that the histogram sits fairly well for what the subject matter is. So I'm just going to start by making some global adjustments initially, so just a little bit of increase in contrast, and I just want to drop my highlights there. I'm actually going to start by darkening the image so that I can then selectively brighten it in areas that I want to, not only from a luminance perspective but also a color temperature perspective. So I'm just going to drop the highlights. I'm going to drop the exposure just a tiny bit. There we go. So that just brings back the histogram a little bit. I'm just going to raise the shadows a little bit because I don't want to kind of block up or compress those shadows at all. I'm also going to just add a touch of clarity and texture. I'll go back and revisit those a little bit later, but I just wanted to get those happening. And some saturation and vibrance. Now, the color profile that I have set for this camera, it's quite flat in terms of color and contrast, so I tend to add quite a bit of vibrance and saturation just to bring the image back up to where I want it to be. For this image and for my approach of editing, I want the colors to be quite vibrant, so which is why I'm adding quite a bit of vibrance and saturation there. As with any setting though, I might revisit that in the future as I go through the editing process. If we go over to detail, I'm just going to add a tiny bit of sharpening and a little bit of masking, just holding down my Alt key, just to really only have the masking, which I'm applying quite a bit there, just have the masking only obviously affecting those areas that have sharp edges, and not areas where there's a gentle transition of tone. Alright, let's go over to, remove chromatic aberration is checked, and nothing there for now, that's fine. Alright, so I'm just going to have a little play with color temperature, because initially when I approached this image I was a little bit unsure about where to go. It's obviously quite a cool image. I mean, if we go back to the original white balance, you can see it's quite cool, but there's a little bit of warmth there with the lighting and the buildings in the distance there, and obviously the lighting over on the left hand side. So if I just look at what that looks like if I warm it up, it looks quite good, but I don't necessarily want to warm up all of the image. I really like the pathway and like the footpath in and the two chairs in this image. I think it frames the central part of the image quite well, along with the trees, and then looking at the village in the distance. I think that's quite interesting, and certainly something that I want to focus on and maximize if possible. So again, I'm just going to drop that down. And what I'm going to go over to now is my adjustment brush. Shortcut is K, and I want to start applying a few selected adjustments in areas. So as I mentioned earlier, I really like this path and the two chairs, and I just want to use that to kind of highlight and focus the viewer and the attention of the viewer to kind of follow that path to the village in the distance. I'm going to go back to my global adjustments, and again I'm going to drop the exposure just a little bit. I'm going to increase my contrast a little bit because I just want to, I guess, increase the drama of the image a little bit. And I'm going to go back to my adjustment brush. You can see I've just got plus 25 on exposure there, so just keeping it simple. It's not masses of change, it's not big change with each application. It's enough to see the effect, but not enough to be doing it kind of out of control, if that makes sense. So it's a gentle and gradual application, but it's not, it's in a controlled manner, if that makes sense. Alright, I'm just going to get rid of that overlay so we can see our image unencumbered, or uninhibited I should say. Drop the highlights a little bit more. I just want to keep control over those highlights. I don't want to blow them completely out. Yep, no, that's looking good. Just going to increase the contrast a little bit more and a little bit of the texture. A little bit more and a little bit more of the clarity, just to bring the kind of detail up there a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is go back to my adjustment brush and I'm going to zero out the exposure, so just enter a value of 0, and I'm going to slightly increase the color temperature. I'm just going to start with plus 10 just to see what that does, and I'm just going to paint in a little bit of warmth within the footpath and the village in the distance, just because I want to bring up, I guess, the warmth that we're kind of naturally seeing because of those lights. It's very, very interesting when we start to play around with selective color temperature, because you can get some great effects. I'm kind of liking where that's going. Again, it's almost like, you know, I guess with this image, I'm seeing it as, you know, you're in a cold environment and a bit of a challenging environment, but there's a warmth around being near home or near a village, especially with that ambient light, that mixture of the lighting along with the ambient light just starting to come up first thing in the morning. Alright, I'm just going to go over to our global adjustments or our landing page, and I'm going to HSL adjustment, hue, saturation, luminance. I'll leave a link to a video below that I have done on HSL in the past. And what I want to do is just drop the blues in terms of luminance or brightness a little bit, so which is mostly going to affect the sky. And I'm just going to drop those a little bit. The reason I'm using this as a tool is I don't want to, if I just used like a exposure drop with an adjustment brush or some sort of vignetting or some other effect, it's going to also drop the brightness of these trees, which I don't want to do because I like the fact that there's detail in the tree branches, which is quite good. So yeah, you can see that detail there, and certainly looking at the shadow areas, there's not, it hasn't fully lost detail. Noticing quite a bit of chromatic aberration there actually, so which I'm going to deal with now while I think of it. If we have a look at lens correction, now I have removed chromatic aberration checked, but you can see that it's still affecting it quite badly. There's still quite a bit of aberration there, so I'm going to apply a manual reduction. So I'm just going to increase that purple amount and also that green amount, and you can see it's removed that immediately. If I just drop that purple to 0, you can see that that purple fringing appears quite quickly. The green amount, I'm just going to increase the area. Yep, that's much better. Much better. Excellent. Alright, let's go back. Yep. Okay, so fringing is taken care of. A little bit of manual adjustment there, which is fine. Not an entirely uncommon scenario. If we go back to HSL adjustment, you can see, as I mentioned, I've just dropped the luminance of that blue, and you can see it is just because the sky is quite blue. It's just affecting that sky area, which is great. All right, saturation. Do I want to increase, decrease? No. Might just put a little bit of extra blue saturation there, just keep it interesting. And no, I'm gonna leave that hue. I mean, if I adjust the hue for the blues, it does bring it to a more realistic blue, but I kind of like the fact that it's a little bit of a different blue in the sky. As is often the case, you know, people have asked me in the past through presentations around the particular light for different places that I've travelled, and it really is unique to different locations. You know, that classic African sunset is a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. You know, the dirt and the dust that's in the atmosphere in Africa is what causes the sunsets to look the way that they do. The same as India. You know, the clarity of air and crispness of the air in the Himalayas is what causes the images to look the way that they do. So that atmospheric environment is very much unique for many locations, and I kind of feel like that blue in the sky is a little bit unique at the moment. Not hugely unique. I mean, it's not massively different, but I kind of like the way that it's working at the moment. So saturation and luminance, I've just made some adjustments there. Just going to drop that brightness a little bit more for the blues, and I'm happy with that. Alright, let's now put our temperature back to 0, and I'm going to do a very slight exposure and highlights adjustment brush. Just going to increase the size because I just want to darken the outer edges of that image just that little bit. Yep, that's great. And we're going to hit N for new, just up here, for a new adjustment brush application. Pop that back to 0, pop that back to 0, and again I'm going to increase my color temperature because I just want to warm up the central part of the image just a little bit more. Yep, I'm enjoying that. I am quite happy with that. I'm going to pop that temperature back to 0 so there's no effect, and just a +20 application of exposure increase. You can see I'm not making massive, profound changes. They're just slight adjustments of the various areas of the image. Now, I'm pretty happy with where that is at the moment, but let's have a look at the before and after. Wow, massively different. Let's have a look at half and half, or comparison side by side. So you can see with those two images side by side, I've definitely achieved what I set out to achieve. I wanted the focus for the image to stay on that pathway, where it naturally leads the eye to the other parts of the village in the distance there. I think the trees and the texture of the trees over the top of the softness of the clouds and the sky is really interesting. I really enjoyed it. But I didn't want the viewer's attention to kind of move out of the image. I really wanted it to stay focused on, on that central part of the image, in the lower part looking through to the village. And that pathway, I really like how it works. The two seats work for me. I probably wish that I'd given a little bit more room to this light on the left-hand side. It's probably the only thing in this image that bothers me a little bit. I should have just opened that up just a tad bit more, maybe to include these trees on the left and right as well. But the way that the image is looking, I'm really happy with that as it stands. Maybe just a tiny bit more exposure. Maybe what I'm going to do actually, the more I think about it, I'm just going to add a little bit more highlight to those chairs, and I'm just going to pop a little bit of contrast in there and a tiny bit of clarity. Yep, that just helps the image. Let me just have a look at the detail there. We're just going to zoom into 100%. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. Yep, that looks lovely. Really happy with that. You can see the church top up in the distance there. In fact, we were just the house that we had was just around the corner from that church, which was fantastic. All right, let's just go back to full screen. The only last adjustment that I'm going to make is a slight increase in exposure to this part of the sky. I kind of feel like it's a little bit dark and overwhelming. You can really see with my editing process that I don't always, very rarely I do, but I certainly don't go in with a strong focused approach on what I'm going to do for each image. It really is a responsive approach. As I often do, I'll start with global adjustments and then I'll move into more specific adjustments. I'll have an idea of what I want the image to do and how I want the image to feel. But the process that I go about achieving that is often adaptive, so it will change as I go. Hope that makes sense. But yeah, I'm really happy with how that's come out. Let's just have another look at the comparison view. Yep, very happy with that indeed. Very simple image. I mean, as I said, I was just out wandering one morning. I had a tripod with me and just one camera. And it was a lovely view. I've been to this location many times. But just adding that little bit of selective lightening and darkening and then selective coolness and warmness through color temperature has really made it an inviting image, and I think is drawing the viewer in through the image, as I mentioned, to that village in the distance, or the other part of the village in the distance. So that is my process for editing this particular image. You can see a lot of the techniques that I've talked about in previous videos I've used in this video, both with global and selective adjustments for different parts of the image, adjustments of exposure, contrast, and color temperature. But you can see overall, they're not massive changes. I haven't changed skies, I haven't changed any elements within the photograph. I haven't cropped it. The only potential cropping that I might consider is cropping that light out, because the more I look at it, the more it's bothering me that it's kind of half in, half out. But overall, I was really happy with the base image, and it's certainly come together really nicely. So simple adjustments and good framing and good exposure at capture, and really not a great deal of editing, and it certainly has given me a result that I'm very happy with. So I hope you found this video helpful and enjoyable, and look forward to you stopping by in the future. As always, if you have any questions, pop them in the comments below. Otherwise, take care and look forward to seeing you soon.